Okay, so we have another vacation sequel thing coming next week. So we thought before we went into the whole Robin Williams thing, we should go ahead and do this one. Now, I think most of you have probably figured it out, but to the few of you that are probably saying, why these two? I'd just like to bring up that the summer of 2006, I think is when Little Miss Sunshine came out. It was early 2006. For an Oscar movie, it was early, I think. And we're watching it, and literally we're watching it, you were there. And I started to realize that this is a movie that begins with establishing where this family's at, and they're having to go on a road trip because we have a whole scene where they're standing in the kitchen and they're trying to figure out whether or not they can fly, and they come to the determination of why they can't. So they all have to pack into the car and they have to drive there. And on the way there, they end up involved with their cranky, elderly, older relative who eventually dies along the way, and they have to do something very unorthodox with the body in order to keep the trip going. And then at some point later on as well, they get pulled over by a motorcycle cop, and some interesting things ensue. And then they eventually get to where they're going, and they are denied entrance at first. But they eventually get themselves in there and do what they need to do while they're there, and they end up getting arrested for it. But everything becomes happy-go-lucky when they decide that no charges will be pressed and they can go home. Oh! Hello!
Wow.
Okay, so, as you can see, I thought this was just enough similarity to maybe put these two together. What do you think?
I think so.
Okay. So, despite the fact that they're really kind of two totally different approaches to things, but while we're on the subject of Little Miss Sunshine, let's go ahead and start there. What's really interesting about this got attention immediately. I'm pretty sure it was a Sundance movie. I don't say that with complete confidence, but I remember it had buzz really, really early in the year. And the interesting thing about it was it's a very, very feel-good comedy. A very funny, feel-good comedy about extremely, extremely miserable people. Which is intriguing enough to say the least. And they kind of, I don't know, symbolism's kind of a heavy word to use, but they kind of show that to you immediately when, after we're introduced to everybody, the last person we're introduced to in the family is Steve Carell's character, who has just survived a suicide attempt. And when the title of the movie comes up, the word sunshine is over his face while he's staring out the window wishing he was dead. So, and then where after that, it does kind of, the thing about Little Miss Sunshine that's kind of maybe off-putting to some people is by the title and the concept and just the way it's handled, and just by looking at it in its appearance. This kind of screams like it's one of those movies that get under people's skin as far as being overly indie. And surely you know exactly what I'm talking about. And I can see that, but the way it does handle it, the way indie movies love to do the realism thing, is handled really, really well in this movie, almost perfectly, as seen by this dinner scene before they leave, before any of that stuff happens. And we slowly but surely get everybody at the dinner table one at a time while they're all doing their own frantic thing. And then Arkin comes in screaming about the goddamn fucking chicken every day. I love the detail that Frank has to drink out of the glass that has the McDonald's mascot on it, or whatever that is. And yeah, they're basically splitting up KFC and sharing a 2 liter of Sprite because that's literally all they. And they throw a salad into it because she feels the need to kind of do the healthy thing, even though they're eating fried chicken out of a bucket. And then to top it off, the angry placement of a box of popsicles on the table saying, "Here's dessert." All of that is just. I think most people in their lives have had that dinner before, many, many, many times, growing up especially.
Yep.
And it's almost just like that. Up to and including the bickering parents afterwards. I've always loved the scene with Tony Collette taking the angry bite out of the popsicle and immediately regretting the decision. So yes, and the thing about it is all these different characters have their own thing going on, which really, really helps. And they all it's all kind of eventually building up to, there's one objective in this whole movie, but by the end of it, all of them have gone through kind of a change in character. And for the most part. I would just like to point out that 2 people got Oscar recognition for this, with Alan Arkin and Abigail Breslin. Both of them were nominated. Arkin actually won, much to most people's surprise.
Yeah.
But the whole cast is practically perfect. I really, really want to point a finger here at Greg Kinnear, who obviously he's the first credited person, and he's pretty much the patriarch of the group. Technically, that's Arkin, but it's basically him. And Greg Kinnear is really brilliant in this movie because he plays that jock like dad person. It's not really a jock necessarily, but the guy that's absolutely obsessed with winning and his 9-step program, and he's very strict about pretty much anybody who's not a winner is a loser and stuff like that. And he really, really pushes her hard over it. And it would, in any other movie, it would make him extremely unlikable, and you'd just kind of wait for his comeuppance. Which does happen occasionally, like the scene where they all kind of confront him at the restaurant, and the scene ends with Dwayne shooting the straw paper at him. But that's not the way he plays the character, because there are those moments, like, it's a whole kind of thing with his character where in his very first scene, like there's no secret about it, in his very first scene when we see him going through his 9-step program and about being a winner, he's giving this speech to about 5 people, and we realize that he himself is kind of a loser. And you can kind of see it to where he absolutely is trying to fight through it, but he kind of knows it deep down. Which is probably what drives him to be so, if my kids aren't winners and they're losers thing, and really, really pushing for it. And he plays this in a way that makes him really, really sympathetic, because there are moments in this movie where you just, would like to deck him, but you never fully reach that because, you just kind of feel for him when he gets to those moments. When he gets to his really, really low moments, when he gets screwed over by Bryan Cranston. It's all this. But then he can also be really, really funny, too. The whole dancing scene aside, there's one particular moment that I love when, after they're pulled over by the motorcycle, who, by the way, is Dean Norris. So it was a Breaking Bad reunion pre-Breaking Bad. It's weird. They go around, and we realize that the situation is going to be handled because it is not the body that Dean Norris thought he was hiding, but the magazines. So there's this great moment where he's going through them, and he's just saying, like, "Oh man, I love this stuff, and don't worry, I'm not going to rat you out." And he's just going through and kind of perving out at them. And Kinnear just has this flabbergasted look on his face, and just to kind of join in, just looks down and goes, "Yeah. Sweetness." I've always loved that kind of questionable delivery, and just that scene in general, how it's punctuated with him saying, "I'll tell you what happened when I regained consciousness." This movie is great with being able to do those, having those situational comedic moments, and not just, slapstick or lines, or it really, really sets up to have a lot of comedic payoffs. And it seems really well thought out that way, which is probably worth noting. It did win Michael Arndt the original screenplay Oscar, who's best known now for writing Toy Story 3, I think. Because he used to be Matthew Broderick's assistant, and he quit doing that when he wrote this. So
in Hollywood, you kind of just fail upward.
So, and then we have, okay, I guess we can talk about, we have 2 Oscar-nominated performances here, but there were 2 performances apart from Kinnear's that should have been nominated. Kinnear definitely should have been. A lot of people say Steve Carell was totally snubbed, and I also have often said that Toni Collette was as well.
Mm-hmm.
This was kind of Steve Carell's first big, like, real, dramatic thing. But people always kind of put an asterisk by it before Foxcatcher came out, because he's playing a dramatic character, but it's in a comedic setting, so it's still somewhat a comedic performance, because he's kind of within the whole balance of the ensemble. But he still does have to have comedic scenes, and he has to have some really, really heavy dramatic scenes. And he just sells this perfectly. And even when he doesn't have to really be a lot of either one. When he just kind of has to be, like, there's the moments at the beginning when he's just gotten there, and given the whole situation, he's kind of just nervous about everything and doesn't really want to necessarily interact. Like, he even makes the choice to not talk at all on the way back to the hospital, even though it's just her in the car with him. But his character has a slow progression as the movie goes, where he starts to actually become kind of the uncle that he would have been had he always been there. Like the uncle that, we all know and love that we've had at one point or another. And he does that really, really naturally, too, while also having to kind of slip back into the drama occasionally, like whenever Larry Sugarman's brought up. And it's a really great, fascinating character, too, to just watch develop. And, of course, as always, Toni Collette is totally brilliant in this. And both, once again, everybody has to balance comedy and drama at one point or another throughout this movie, and that's what makes it challenging for everybody involved. And Paul Dano I've seen get a lot of credit lately too. Now that his name is getting a lot more well known, a lot of people come back to this when they talk about back when he was, well, still, but when he was really, really not getting much notice for the great work he was putting out.
It's big on him in Detroit Rock City, so it's way early to the party.
Well, he totally took off because he had this and There Will Be Blood back to back.
Yep.
There Will Be Blood was the very next year after this, so. And then it just kind of went from there. Now, having said that, I've seen the movie many, many times. I'm not quite sure where those nominations came from completely. I kind of get Arkin's nomination. The win you could probably chalk up to him being such a veteran and having so many great roles prior to this, and a number of nominations. But, or maybe just 2. I think it was 2 nominations, but before this, but still. That's more than a lot of actors get. And both of them were in the 60s. So, but he does, obviously it's mostly a comedic performance. Most of it is him ranting. I love all the stuff that gets brought up. Him getting kicked out of Sunset Manor, and I had second-degree burns on my Johnson. The Nazi bullets. We never get the story on the Nazi bullets. But, it's mostly that. And then there are two scenes, though, where he gets to go dramatic. And even then he kind of the first one he kind of keeps in a comedic tone. The scene where, or no, the second one I guess it'd be, when, Olive is freaking out because, Richard's gonna hate her if she's not a winner. And she's kind of starting to realize the fact that she's not, beauty contest material as the movie progresses. She's starting to kind of slowly figure that out, and it's starting to kind of settle in that this might all be for nothing. And he has to do the same where he tells her, she's the most beautiful girl in the world, and he does the very grandfatherly scene. One little tiny detail I've always noticed is there's always that scene in a movie where the parent is leaving the room and the child keeps calling back to them, and each time the parent gets called back, they get more and more frustrated with every what response. every single time she calls him back into the room, which is like 3 or 4 times, it's always the same calm yes, as if she's just asking him the first time. I always thought that was kind of a nice little kind of grandfatherly detail to add to him. And his other dramatic scene is the after Richard's been screwed over by Bryan Cranston, and he goes up to the front of the bus and kind of has his, not many people get this far, and I'm proud of you scene, and that's another really great Kinnear scene too, because he has to kind of do he's kind of just trying to brush it off and say, okay, Dad, but then he grabs his hand, and they have the most genuine moment they have, and it only lasts for like 5 seconds, but it really, really stays in the tone. So yes, great. It's worth, having said all this now, it's probably so surprising to nobody, this did win the SAG Ensemble. This came so close. Even the directors didn't get nominated, surprisingly. But this was so close to winning Best Picture. Like, people don't even know. This had SAG and this had PGA going in. And The Departed beat it at the very last minute.
It was such a race, too.
Obviously, I do prefer The Departed is one of my all-time favorite movies, so I can't argue, and I would never even start to argue. But Little Miss Sunshine was really close. A lot more than people know. So, now, another thing is, there's, what else do we have here? There's a lot of things in there that are kind of, they don't necessarily feel like they'd be in the kind of humor that's kind of in a movie that did that well at Oscar time. Just kind of, like I was talking about how it's mostly situational humor, which is great. And all of the stuff that goes wrong with the bus is where a lot of the comedy comes from as well. But there's also just lines thrown in there every now and then that just really stand out. There's one scene in particular that almost feels like it's out of a sitcom. And it seems like it should be totally out of place. But I personally thought it was in the movie at such the right place, at such the right time, that it was kind of a really nice way to do it. Because we've reached the most serious scene in the movie when Argan's character dies and they're in the hospital. And the doctor comes out and tells them, he's got a very soft voice, and he's telling them what happened, and then he looks to Olive and he's trying to comfort her and saying, like, he just went to sleep and didn't wake up, and that's just all that happened. He said, we did our best, but I'm sorry, it's all over. And then he talks about how they're going to have a bereavement liaison, somebody that comes out and helps them deal with the pain. So he just goes to an open doorway and screams her name and walks away. And then she comes out, and then she ends up getting frustrated because they have to leave. And despite being the bereavement liaison, she has to scream at them in the waiting room, "You're not the only person that's had somebody die here today." And she's got that sassy tone, so it's this whole clusterfuckery of things. Now talking about the fact that we have this thing where all these characters have to go through a change at some point or another. We do reach the end, and by that point, Richard, who has basically said that everybody must be a winner or they're a total loser, it's just out in the open now. He failed, and is what he would normally consider a loser by this point. Toni Collette's been put through the emotional ringer because she's kind of the glue that holds everybody together. Because we have, obviously, her own family with Frank, and then her son, who's not Richard's, with Dwayne, and then her new family with Richard and Olive. And she's just kind of the glue that holds everybody together. And Arkin, who is Richard's dad, obviously. All this entire family who's coming from totally different places is held together by her, and she's kind of has to be the one that's like in a constant state of stressed out in order to keep this kind of a happy going on kind of thing. And as I said, Frank has a really nice progressive thing going on throughout the movie, where he starts from the quiet guy who just tried to kill himself and would rather be anywhere but here, to totally embracing the family in a totally believable way, not like a, really cheesy, overly sentimental kind of thing. It's a really, really natural way that he gets there. Obviously, Dwayne has the whole thing where, with flight school, That's one problem. If there's one problem I have with this movie and its screenplay, it's that one scene with Dwayne and Frank when Dwayne has the line about life is just one beauty contest after another. That kind of seems like Hallmark greeting card kind of bullshit, or like those motivational posters you see. That's the only scene that doesn't really work for me, but it doesn't do anything to affect everything around it, so we're good. And it's a nice bonding scene between Frank and Dwayne. With Frank's line, it's good that you're talking, Dwayne, you're not near as stupid as you look. And then one of my favorites is, obviously, all of us eventually kind of gotten to the point to where, you know, she's a part of the Little Miss Sunshine pageants and loves being a part of them, and then she slowly starts to kind of realize that it's probably not exactly her calling. And then the great moment that I always love, I don't know if this is the point or if they shot it this way for a reason or what, but the one scene that's always really, really kind of hit me, like right in this area, is the moment when they're taking off at the very end, when they have to do the running start again with the van. And after everything has gone on and everybody else in the movie has gone through their change, there's the moment where Olive is the first one. She was always the first one to run onto the bus, and then Arkham would pull her in, and then they'd do kind of a chain thing until everybody was on. And this very last scene, we're seeing Olive run to get inside the bus, and it's the first time we've seen her do it without Arkham there to pull her in. She has to do it herself. And I always thought that was a very... They didn't really put any attention on it, but just kind of a way of showing the progression of all the characters I thought was really poignant in a way. And it always gets me every time it happens, especially with the music playing as it's going into its final shot. So yes, there's quite a bit to like about this movie, and I saw it, the audiences saw it, and the Academy saw it. So, yes, there's really not a lot to complain about here at all. So, real quickly, let's go right over to Vacation. I'm just going to put this on the table right now. Vacation's a movie I grew up with. I probably saw this movie for the first time at like 4 years old, and multiple times a year since. So a good 20 years I've been acquainted with this movie. It's worth noting, in case you're concerned, for a long time it was where it was taped off TV.
Mm-hmm.
So it was a long time before I just knew how dirty this movie was. I had always seen the cleaner version.
No, of course.
And it kind of blew my mind when I realized just how fucking dirty this movie is.
I did that with both Vacation movies.
And even the stuff that was still in the edited version, a lot of it was lost on me. Having said that, I've learned over the years that when you're this familiar with a movie, especially a comedy, it's really hard to do an actual review of it without just saying this is funny and this is funny and that is funny. So I was really not quite sure how to go into this, but basically what I think the most important thing that Vacation does is it was 1983, and it still manages to hold up to this day as far as being considered one of the funniest movies ever made. Like, it still is. And with this combination of Harold Ramis and Chevy Chase, who I guess didn't totally and completely get along in the making of it, but as we've learned, when you're kind of, you know, butting heads a little bit, that's probably usually for the better, depending on how it turns out. And of course, this was written by John Hughes, which is immensely helpful. Apparently, it's from like something he wrote in the actual National Lampoon magazine that was adapted into an actual feature-length screenplay. And from this script and from these actors, we were able to create. I think the name Griswold is pretty much known by pretty much everybody that's ever seen a movie. They know exactly what you're talking about and who exactly you're talking about. And how Chevy Chase and Vero D'Angelo were able to build these characters and make them into something really iconic in comedy, actually. Like we say, I know iconic is a big word, like a strong word that's thrown around a lot, but I think this is a movie that kind of holds that. And it's the thing about it for me also was, for a long time, I don't even know when it stopped. It'd been maybe a couple years before shit went down, but there was a long period of time in my life where every single year, during the summer, we would take a road trip to Florida and back, as a family. And this, I think another thing that really, really helps grab people with this movie is how much of an accurate depiction of that it is. Like, things don't, I mean, for us anyway, things don't go that wrong, but obviously that's the whole concept, is everything that can go wrong will go wrong, and usually in a hilariously funny kind of way. And like I was saying, one of the big things, though, is that it actually holds up. Like, you would think some of the stuff would be dated. One scene, obviously, that really, really sticks out is when they take the detour and they have to ask for directions. And they're in the, we'll say, the shoddy neighborhood.
Okay.
And there are a couple of times where Clark thinks, we'll have to go back to Airplane here. Clark thinks that speaking jive will help him out here. And the scene happens, and as you can probably imagine, or I've seen many, many times, this scene today, if it were done today, would probably be very embarrassing.
Yeah.
It would probably get the movie a lot of shit. But even today, this scene is still hilarious. In the time that we live in, where this is totally a subject you don't go towards. Otherwise, you're going to get crucified, and you're going to look like a... You're just going to make your movie look fucking stupid. It's still really funny. There's something about Chevy Chase's delivery and the way he does it. There's a reason he is so often considered a comedic genius. And this movie with this character, the series with this character, is a way to really, really show that. And of course we have stuff like the introduction of Cousin Eddie, who is Randy Quaid's infamous character. That whole scene with Eddie is just the whole... There's probably a joke every single 30 seconds that passes in those scenes. They mostly involve the fact that Eddie's family is like poor trailer trash, but still, the fact that they keep them that rapid fire. There's the whole I don't know why they call this a hamburger helper. It does just fine by itself. There's no meat on the hamburgers. They're eating condiments on a bun. Vicky is stirring the Kool-Aid with her arm. And I love Clark's delivery of, Vicky, can I help you with the Kool-Aid? Please? Then there is, the stuff I didn't, catch on to back at the time, like the incest thing with, Vicky. By the way, Vicky is Jane Krakowski. And I did not know that for a long time, and that kind of blew my mind, because she hasn't really changed that much. Like, you can really tell when you know. But that, the incest thing with, I French kiss, and my dad says I'm the best at it. And, I for some reason, when I was younger, I always missed the thing with, do you have asteroids? And he says, no, my dad does. He can't even sit on the toilet sometimes. After he's gone through all the games. There's the weed jokes and the masturbation jokes. There,
a lot of stuff that'll go over your head when you were a kid.
Mm-hmm. But then there's the stuff like when Eddie's has the beer and he still has the six-pack with one still attached to it. And he looks at Clark and he says, you look like you use a cold one. And he's like, yeah. And he hands him the one he's already opened and been drinking out of and takes the new one for himself. I remember my dad always laughed really hard at the line when he's trying to... Obviously, Clark is not a fan of Eddie, and you always kind of have to deal with that relative that you don't really care for.
Yep.
And you just kind of have to try to socialize. And you just sense that whole awkwardness in that one delivery Clark has, where he's just looking Eddie over and just says, oh, you're looking really... fit? You just get that whole vibe just from that one line. And there's a lot of just, there's another thing that's really good is, there's a lot of sex jokes, but surprisingly they don't really resort to gross out. The closest thing I think we get to gross out is, when the dog pisses on the picnic basket, when he's doing the sandwich dance for Christy Brinkley, whatever the fuck that is. Apparently that was totally improv too. Like he just had to be doing something, so he just did the sandwich dance. I think that's the closest thing we get to gross out, is when Annetta just keeps eating it. And but, yeah. Then there is, Clarkson, also another one of those characters where, he's funny almost all the time. Because there are moments when he's just kind of supposed to be funny, and he's just kind of being, like, the silly dad character, and he's still funny anyway. Then there's the scenes where he's angry, and it's still funny anyway, or he's getting frustrated, and he's still funny, despite being that. One of my favorite lines is when they can't find the Grand Canyon, and he just snaps and says, "It's only the biggest goddamn hole in the world." I love when he still tries to kind of keep up the dad thing with, after they've gone through the detour sign and crashed the car. Just that nice delivery of, "Wow, Dad, you must have jumped this thing 50 yards. Oh, that's nothing to be proud of, Rusty." 50 yards. And then, as the movie progresses, he's slowly losing his mind more and more, and the more that he does, the funnier it is. Two of the funniest scenes in the movie are the one where it seems like it's going to be the serious scene in the movie, but it's one of the funniest when after they've dropped Edna's body off, when the movie gets really dark for a second, and everybody wants to go home. They've had it, and they just can't take this anymore. It's another 10 hours, and they just cannot do this. And he stops the car and goes on this legendary tirade.
Yes.
I'm gonna have fun, you're gonna have fun, we're all gonna have so much fucking fun, you're gonna need plastic surgery to remove your goddamn smiles, you'll be whistling zippity doodle out of your assholes. I'm on a pilgrimage to see a moose. It's kind of a prelude to Hallelujah Holy Shit from Christmas Vacation when it says, "Praise Marty Moose, holy shit." "Don't touch" is really great. Just that whole scene. And probably my favorite line in the movie comes at the very end, when they finally realize that the park is closed for 2 weeks. And this is finally him. This is pretty much the worst thing that could have happened at this particular time. We've had the Chariots of Fire scene. He's crying because he's so happy to be here.
Yeah.
And then after he punches the nose in, and then we buy his toys, he go to his movies, he owes us. He owes the Griswolds, right? Fucking A, right? See, that was a line I always missed when I was younger, too. And the first time I heard it, I completely lost it.
Oh, yeah.
And then just the great moments with John Candy and the park rides. What was it's Wally World is what, a Six Flags?
Six Flags Magic Mountain.
Yeah.
Which is also used in Beverly Hills Cop 3.
Yeah. So, what was his name? Okie Dokie the elephant or something.
Yeah, Okie Dokie.
So, what I'm really trying to say here is, yes, there is reason that this is considered one of the funniest movies ever made, and it's a movie I don't even know how many times I've seen. I don't even know, dude.
I know, I'm the same way.
When I was just in North Carolina, we were watching it on TV. It was on in the evenings. They were double featuring it in European for some reason, and nothing else. As far as the series is concerned, I do prefer, Christmas is kind of the ultimate one, but there's a reason this one's the one that really kicked it off and has the reputation that it has. But as far as
a battle,
yeah, as far as a movie with like real, like a real center to it, while also Vacation is very admirable because it's just nothing but laughs. Little Miss Sunshine is just as many laughs, but with a real heart and some really heavy scenes in it, and being able to balance it all out. I think Little Miss Sunshine accomplishes more, but yeah. They're both really, really well liked, and definitely for a reason, so... Well, Vacation also kind of has the realism thing going on, like the scene with him and Ellen in the kitchen, or the scene when they're sitting in Eddie's living room. Just kind of, it almost kind of feels like you're just eavesdropping on relatives who are visiting, which is really interesting. And like I said, the stuff where it actually kind of captures the cabin fever of a road trip, like the scene where Rusty's causing a scene because Audrey's eating peanut butter cups and smiling with them stuck all over her teeth. It's like, that's very ridiculous, but that totally would be something that a kid would complain about on a road trip.
True.
So my brother did all kinds of gross shit. And
I'm not surprised.
when you're spending hours in a backseat with him. But yeah, so I would say Little Miss Sunshine would be closer to, you know, something that's really, really great. But yeah, Vacation has a classic status for a reason, for sure. So yeah.
Next week starts our Robin Williams tribute month, so stay tuned for that. So we've got 4 big verses coming at you, and we're going to have some interesting times.
All right.
So that being said, I want to thank you guys and girls out there for watching. I continue to watch pop throughout the week. We've got Horror Nights news coming very soon. I got a feeling it's inevitable, as well as a lot of wrestling content. Sip and Snack and AJ's movie reviews next week will be Vacation and Mission Impossible Rogue Nation. That's going to be coming your way. So Gaming with Ash on Saturday. Sunday, we'll kick into the Robin Williams versus. So that being said, thank you guys and girls out there for watching. AJ, any parting words?